Hello, everyone. I'll thank again all our attendees for joining us today in a webinar about our latest studies released on specialty excipients for parenteral pharmaceuticals. We'll go, Carlos and I, on 4 key parts today. I will introduce Klein and Company for those of you who are not familiar. That would be very quick. Before then, focusing more about the topic of today's interest, going first throughout the report scope and methodology, and then Carlos will present you the key market findings from our latest study, as well as a market outlook and our forecast for the market of excipients for Parenteral. So getting started with the introduction to Klein and Company, I'm pretty sure most of you knows very well about Klein, so I'll be short here. But I wanted to tell that Klein is a global market research and consulting companies. We're covering a few key industries, as you can see on this slide. Carlos and I, as Viera introduced, are from our chemical practice. And in our chemical practice, the pharmaceutical excipients or the pharmaceutical chemicals part is one of our sweet spots at Klein, and one of the area of specialty chemicals that we are covering. So Klein is a global market research and consulting company. As I said, global is very important. We've really on the ground on all the major markets, and as you can see on the map, the company is headquartered in Parsippany, New Jersey, but heavily implanted in all major regions. So 3 offices in Europe, 1 in Middle East, and 4 offices in Asia. This is very important when it comes to covering global markets, because it means we can cover those markets from the ground. So that's for the introduction. Carlos, can you please get to the next slide? I'll now focus more about the topic of today's interest, really, which is our latest report on parenteral excipients. Before getting into the details of that report, and to answer one of the questions we're usually getting in those webinars, to proactively answer that question, I want to give you a taste of our methodology, so you get an understanding of where are the data and figures and trends that Carlos is going to present, where are those coming from. So they're coming from a mixture of primary and secondary research, but what makes us really different at Klein is the importance that the primary research has in our process. Primary research means basically conducting unstructured interviews, unstructured discussions with market participants at a different place of the value chain. So when we're discussing about excipients, it means we would have interviews with drug formulators, with contract manufacturers, with excipients distributors, excipients manufacturers, opinion leaders, governmental agencies, and regulatory bodies, for instance. So discussion at various places of the value chain, and this is very important. This is represent most of the time we spend on our project, roughly 70%. And the information that we get from those interviews are then put together with the information that obviously we are gathering through secondary research. That would be information readily available over the internet, notably. And then with using those inputs to put together our market analysis that is heavily relying on cross-checking. I think this is really key in the type of work we are doing. So that's for the methodology. On my next slide, I will present you actually our portfolio when it comes to pharmaceutical chemicals. So we have started the coverage of pharmaceutical excipients market, let's call it that way, a few decades ago at Klein already, with our offering and with our coverage of OSDF excipients. I think we've worked on the OSDF excipients for more than a quarter century, and this is obviously this was and this still is the largest part of the excipients market globally. But as we've covered this market, we've also expanded our coverage of associated markets with parenteral excipients, topical excipients. Lately, we've also published a nutraceutical excipients as well as a nutraceutical active ingredient studies. And on the top of those 5 published studies, we are now working on a report looking at biologic excipients and ingredients. So it's slightly different. It's very different than what we're doing when we talk about parenteral, where we look at only the fill finish and the formulation excipients, where we look at the entire value chain of biologics, and we look only at biologics, obviously. And then lastly, we are preparing a report about solubility enhancement technologies and their impact on the market of excipients. One more point that is not on this slide that I wanted to mention is that we've also published for the first time this year a complete and global market assessment of the empty hard capsules market. So that's for the overall pharma and related titles at Klein. Now focusing on today's topic of today's interest with the specialty excipient for parenteral pharmaceutical program. This program has, as I said, just been published. It's a study that has a 2020 base year and forecast to 2025, and that's looking at a list of the major formulation excipients when it comes to parenteral formulations that you can see on the screen. The geographical coverage this time, this is the second edition of this study. First edition was covering Europe and the United States. The second edition will be covering Europe, United States, or is covering Europe, United States, and India. Will actually be very interesting to hear your inputs when it comes to what other geographical areas you'd like us to cover. That would be very helpful input for us. And lastly, about this study, this is coming as 2 key deliverables. A fully interactive database that you can see on this screen, that's on the bottom of the screen. This is just a screenshot of that database, which basically functions as an online pivot table. And then reports that are available also through our online platform that's called MyKlein, which present actually on the top of the data that you can find in the database, all that gives the reader all the keys to understand the market. So in understanding where are those figures coming from, what are the trends, the drivers, the market risk trends, etc. So I guess this is all about the introduction to Klein and today's topic. I'll now turn it to Carlos, who will discuss the key market findings from that study.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for the introduction. And again, I would like to welcome everybody to this presentation and thanking everybody of you for attending it. So let's comment briefly the key findings of the research. As we all know, there are different routes of administration of drugs, and the oral route is the most common and preferred one, especially the oral solid, favored by better stability, storage, less expensive to manufacture products, and allowing better patient compliance. However, during last years, the parenteral route has been invigorated, as parenteral developments have gained a lot of momentum due to biologics, which is the fastest growing segment of the pharmaceutical industry. Moreover, the parenteral route is the most effective route for the delivery of the active pharmaceutical substances, especially when drugs cannot be taken orally. Let's now see some specific factors which benefit and drive the increasing interest and the focus on the parenteral route. First is the faster physiological response, as the drug is directly administered into the systemic circulation, as the parenteral route provides more immediate response. Another one is the localized delivery, as the parenteral route allows a localized delivery and the possibility to control the release of the drug over time. One more is that an increasing number of small molecules in the pipeline are poorly soluble APIs, which makes them difficult or impossible to formulate into oral solids. Hence, the parenteral route is becoming more and more important. Novel cancer treatments, including targeted release chemotherapeutic drugs, and also the drugs to reduce the side effects and pain of the chemotherapy, are also used in the parenteral route. And last but not least, and which is currently the most important one and driving the growth, is the development of biopharma and the strong focus and interest on biologics, which is the fastest growing segment, as I said before, on the global pharmaceutical industry. If we see the figure on the right side corresponding to Informa, biopharmaceutical products accounted for only around 15% of the pipeline in 1995, while in 2019, before the pandemic started, nearly 40% of the products in the pipeline were biotech derived. It's true that due to the pandemic, some projects were put aside, but according to all industry experts, it's expected that by 2025, there will be as many biopharmaceutical developments in the pipeline as in the traditional pharma. And biopharma needs the parenteral route, as there is no other administration route at the moment. The first choice of any drug formulation is always the oral solids, but the injectable formulations are of an increasing importance because of the many reasons we just commented, and so are those excipients. Excipients might have different roles as in OSDF or topical for any injectable formulation, but the main and most important for a parenteral excipient is to ensure the physical condition of an API, maintaining its stability and avoiding the degradation, ensuring that no side reactions take place. In reference to them, the parenteral route is different compared to oral solid and the topical pharmaceutical forms, because unlike oral solid and topical formulations, in which excipients hold a very important percentage in the final formulation, the share of an excipient in the final parenteral drug is much lower. As a result of that, there is no such price pressure, such in oral solid or typical or topical developments, and there is much more room for innovation, which is attracting an increasing number of suppliers despite the difficulties and costs for producing excipients targeting the parenteral pharmaceuticals. An example of this is the case of DFE Pharma, which is an established supplier in the oral solid dosage form market, which is currently developing grades of sucrose and trehalose to enter the parenteral excipients market. So now diving more into the world of the parenteral excipients, 3 regions have been analyzed: US, Europe, and India, which represent a large share of the demand of the parenteral excipients market, estimated at $400 million in 2020, and accounting the States and Europe for slightly over 75% of the total excipient demand by value. Parenteral formulations can be of 3 different types: so liquid solutions, liquid suspensions, and lyophilization. So having a look to the market of the parenteral excipients by formulation type, the most common type is the liquid solutions, and hence liquid solutions account for the largest demand of excipients by volume. However, if we check the value figure, we can see that the share of the excipients in lyophilization and liquid suspensions is larger, and the larger or higher value share, despite the low volume, is because certain of the excipients used in those type of formulations, for instance, the use of trehalose in lyophilization, is priced much higher than the most common ingredients used in liquid solutions, which includes, in very large proportion, the intravenous bags. So before analyzing the demand of the excipients, it's important to explain and highlight that there are 2 differentiated markets for excipients: the large volume parenteral excipient market, which is encompassing those excipients that are used in the IV bags, and the small volume parenteral excipients market, which are those excipients that are used in the formulation of small molecules, biopharmaceuticals, and vaccines. Having a look to the volume figure, we can see that dextrose and sodium chloride are the 2 largest excipients used and represent together an estimated 87% share of the total excipient market. Both excipients are used in solutions to adjust tonicity, as parenteral formulations should be isotonic for human plasma to avoid damage onto the tissues. On the other hand, if we check the value graphic, the value figure, we can see that polysorbate 80 and trehalose dominate the market in value. Difference in volume and value is because of their prices. So certain excipients have very high price, which leads to a very high value share, irrespectively of the low volume consumption. If we have a look to the supplier landscape, of course, seeing that 2 ingredients represent more than 87% of the total volume market, the supplier landscape by volume then is dominated by those suppliers which are catering dextrose and sodium chloride. Roquette is accounting for the dominant position in the supply of dextrose and is the leading, which is the largest ingredient and is the leading supplier by volume. Moreover, Roquette owns the leading position by providing excipients such as mannitol, sorbitol, and also cyclodextrins to the market. If we have a look to the value share, we see that Croda is the leading supplier of excipients for parenteral applications. Croda holds a very strong position and very reliable positioning for the parenteral pharmaceutical segment, which is led by the super refined range of excipients, especially the polysorbate 80, polysorbate 20, polyethylene glycols, and lipids. Croda is followed by Roquette, Fansteel, and BASF, and the 4 companies together account for an estimated 70% of the excipients value. Before moving to the next section, I would like to show an example of the level of the detail we get on the report of this study. As can be seen on this slide, for each of the excipients covered, besides an explanation of the excipient grades and prices, we provide consumption in volume and value, a supplier landscape, and the split of the formulation types, the split of the consumption of this ingredient by small molecules and biopharma, and the forecast, and the reason of why we think the ingredients are going to grow faster or slower. So let's move to another important part of our reports, which is the market outlook. And different factors are, sorry, move too fast. So different factors are expected to influence the parenteral excipients in the upcoming years. Key drivers are the strong pipeline, an increasing use of biologics that will require to be delivered by the parenteral route, the growing demand of biosimilar formulations due to the patent expirations of the already biologic products placed in the market, the increasing development of the chemical APIs with poor solubility, which will need to be used in the parenteral administration route. And of course, the pandemic situation is also affecting positively to the parenteral excipients market, as the developments of COVID-19 vaccines will derive also some growth to the excipients. Regarding the restraints, besides patient compliance of parenteral drugs continue to be, hindering a growth compared to the oral solid dosage form market, the development of parenteral drug is more challenging. Thus, the excipient requirements for safety and purity are also higher, which is also making the introduction of new excipients or new grades a bit slower, more difficult, and more expensive than for other administration routes. Moreover, it's important to mention that achieving consistency among the batches and the number of tests required makes more difficult for suppliers to participate and promote their products. Considering then the market studied, the excipients for parenteral applications are estimated to grow at 6.6% over the next 5 years. And it's important to highlight that this is taken into consideration both the large volume parenteral excipients market and the small volume parenteral excipients market. Excluding the volume of dextrose and sodium chloride used in IV bags, which is the large volume parenteral excipients market, as we explained before, the parenteral excipients market is forecast to reach closer to a 10% growth during the next 5 years. Among the 3 regions studied, US is standing out and is expected to be exhibiting the fastest growth, followed by India, given the increase of CMO capabilities, which are less present than for maybe oral solid generics, but increasing as well in India as in other countries such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, Vietnam, according to industry experts. US and Europe will continue to be the largest and the leading regions for parenteral drug production. And these 2 regions are pioneers in the research and innovation in developing new APIs, many of which will be used in the parenteral formulations. Regarding the formulation types, lyophilization is expected to exhibit the larger growth compared to liquid solutions and liquid suspensions. This is also related to the increasing developments on the biological and biosimilar products for different therapeutic areas that will require this type of formulation, as lyophilization processes are helping to overcome the instability issues that APIs are presenting. Related to excipients, therefore, those used in lyophilization and the surfactants are the best position to grow in the next 5 years. Lyophilization, despite not being the preferred option, helps to solve those instability issues, while the strong positioning of biologics, which are more viscous substances, will favor the use of surfactants, as they help to improve the surface tension and dilute the API, making it more suitable, less harmful, and more pleasant for the patients. Furthermore, ensuring stability and limiting aggregation on proteins that are polystable will be key for future developments. That's all from my side. I'd like to thank you everybody once more for attending the webinar, and I hope you found it interesting. I turn it back to Nicola for concluding.
Thank you, Carlos, for this very interesting presentation. I'm looking at Q&A and the Q&A panel and the chat box, and I have two questions actually. So I start with one that's a pretty standard one. Well, not standard, but that I would expect. I think you've given part of the answer during your speech, Carlos, but it's probably good to underline it once more. And the question sounds: what's the effect of COVID-19 on the parenteral excipients market, or what's the expected effect on that on the market?
Okay, so there is a clear positive impact on the consumption of excipients for the parenteral route during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, for instance, during the past months, we have been hearing that there has been a strong use of remdesivir used in patients with severe symptoms of COVID-19, which has derived, for instance, some growth on the cyclodextrins. And of course, the developments of the different vaccines that are happening to prevent the COVID-19 will also have a positive impact on the consumption of those excipients, as you know, majority or large part of the population will be vaccinated.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Another question for you here is about the if you're expecting that competition on this market will increase in the following years.
Sure, I think I mentioned briefly something. So yes, indeed, that's going to happen. The share of the excipients in the course of the final formulation in the parenteral route is smaller than for OSDF or topical. Which, you know, excipients represent a big percentage on those two applications, so in those two routes. So there is less price sensitivity on the cost of excipients for parenteral. That's the fact that would be attracting new suppliers, despite the fact that, you know, technical requirements for producing those excipients are higher. And I mentioned that the DFE Pharma is a good example of one new competitor that is expected to be on the market soon, as currently they are developing two grades, one for trehalose and one for sucrose for this market. Okay, all right, thanks, Carlos. I'm seeing another question, and a few others have popped up here. One sounds, do you have plans to expand the study to the Chinese market? And that's a very good question. Actually, at this point, as I said, we have published Europe, US, and India. Which were markets that you know we got interest for. We'd be very glad to hear if you have interest for other countries or other regions, and we'll be very glad to cover those markets if an interest exists in the industries. So if you'd like to share with us the interest in or the need for other regions, please let us know. You can contact any of the people that are listed on this slide. Another question. I have a chat here. China not prioritized because the market is small for parenterals. No, it's not it's not the reason. The way we work at Klein is that we usually have discussions with
with people in the industry, with our usual customers, and get an understanding of their needs. It's simply that we did not get enough interest in covering China when we started the research for those 3 other regions. It doesn't. I wouldn't read it as as a market being small or not. What about the question about the veterinary parenteral market here? What about veterinary parenteral market size compared to human size? So we have not considered, this is, I think, a good question to refine the scope. We have not considered the veterinary parenteral market and considered any human pharma on this in this study. There is another question that's rather for you here, Carlos. It's asked, did I read right that 20 tons of polysorbate 20 corresponds to a value of 6.8 million euros?
Yeah, I think that was the one was shown. Yeah.
All right. Okay. And then I'm looking at the rest. There's some questions I'm not sure to understand myself, so we will follow up on those offline. And I think that's from those I understand, I guess, and we've answered to all. In any cases, and as I mentioned before, please feel free to reach out to. You have my contact details, Carlos' contact details, and the contact details of the account managers that are covering major regions. So Ana Maria Bulmaga in EMEA, Francis Davidson in North America, Pierre Solgadri in Asia. You can feel free to contact any of us for any questions, any information about the reports that we discussed today, and from which Carlos presented the key findings. We thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you find this this webinar interesting, and we'll be looking forward to you joining us for further webinar. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to end the session at this moment, and just a final reminder that if you didn't have enough time to take a note of the contact information, you can find it on our website, or you can just simply reply to the email you receive from the webinars@kleingroup.com, and we'll respond to you after this. Thank you all for attending, and goodbye.